I never thought I'd be the kind of person to question my own sister's intentions, especially not a week before her wedding. But sometimes your gut starts whispering the truth long before your mind is ready to hear it. I'm 28 years old. My younger sister Sarah is 26. She's always been the vibrant one, bubbly, beautiful, effortlessly charming. I love her. Or at least I thought I did. Until recently, I would have said she was my best friend. We'd grown up close, and I've always supported her, through heartbreaks, job losses, and every new beginning she ever needed. And yet here I was, battling a sinking feeling that the person I trusted most was slowly crossing a line with my boyfriend. Tom, 29, and I had been dating for nearly 3 years. He's kind, patient, and incredibly loyal. At least that's what I believed. But lately, things felt off. It started with small things. Sarah would laugh at every single one of his jokes, even the ones that barely made me smile. "Oh my God, you're hilarious," she'd gush, touching his arm as if he had just told the joke of the century. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself she was just excited. Wedding stress can make people act strangely, right? But soon, the signs became harder to ignore. She began finding excuses to be near him, asking him to help with her wedding playlist, the seating chart, the floral arrangements. "I just need a guy's opinion," she'd say, while I stood literally right there. Her hand would rest on his arm a beat too long. She'd lean into his space while talking, as though the room wasn't big enough for her to stand anywhere else. I tried to stay calm, to not jump to conclusions, but my chest would tighten every time I saw her gaze linger on him when she thought no one was looking. It wasn't friendly. It was intentional. It was possessive. It made me feel invisible in my own relationship. One night, after a particularly awkward family dinner where Sarah laughed too loudly at everything Tom said and kept finding excuses to sit beside him, I finally asked him about it. "Did you notice anything weird with Sarah tonight?" I asked as we got ready for bed. Tom looked puzzled. "Like what?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "She's been really touchy, flirty, even. It's not just tonight. It's been happening a lot lately." He let out a small chuckle, clearly dismissing it. "Babe, you're overthinking. She's just excited. She probably doesn't even realize it. It's harmless." Harmless, that word stuck with me all night. I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Why did it feel like I was the only one seeing what was happening? The next few days, I paid closer attention. I didn't want to, believe me, I didn't. But I had to trust my instincts. And the more I watched, the more obvious it became. She was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. And the worst part? Tom didn't push her away. Was I crazy? Was I insecure? Or was I finally seeing a painful truth unfold before my eyes? I wasn't sure where this was heading, but I knew one thing. Something was wrong, and whether anyone else acknowledged it or not, I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. It was the Saturday before Sarah's wedding when everything finally boiled over. My parents were hosting a family barbecue, something light and casual to break the tension before the big day. I almost didn't go. My nerves were frayed, my mind cluttered with doubts, and Tom had been brushing me off for days, assuring me I was seeing things. But I showed up anyway. I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I just needed to breathe. Instead, I ended up with my heart shattered in a backyard filled with fairy lights and folding chairs. It started innocently enough. The grill sizzled with burgers and ribs, and Sarah floated around like a glowing bride-to-be. Everyone was chatting and laughing, but I couldn't relax. Not when I saw Sarah and Tom whispering in a corner of the yard, standing a little too close. Again, I watched as she touched his arm, giggled like a schoolgirl, and tilted her head toward him, and he didn't pull away. He didn't even look uncomfortable. When they finally noticed me staring, they stepped apart quickly. Too quickly. Sarah smiled and walked off like nothing had happened. Tom gave me a look, one I couldn't read, then turned his attention back to the grill. I felt sick. That night, after we got home, I confronted him again. "What were you and Sarah talking about earlier?" He looked surprised. "She was asking about the wedding playlist again," he said. "Why?" "Why were you standing so close?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why does she always find a reason to touch you? Why don't you stop it?" He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Are we really doing this again? Yes, I snapped, because I feel like I'm being pushed out of my own relationship, and you won't even acknowledge it. Tom sat down on the edge of the bed, his eyes filled with frustration. She's your sister. She's just being friendly. What do you expect me to do? Yell at her in front of your whole family? No, I said, voice cracking. I expect you to set boundaries. I expect you to make it clear that you're with me, not her. He looked down, silent. Do you even see what this is doing to me? I whispered. I think you're letting your emotions get the better of you, he replied, and that hurt more than anything. Not because it was cruel, but because it told me he still didn't see it. Or maybe he just didn't want to. I barely slept that night, and by morning I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I called Sarah and asked if we could meet, just the two of us. She sounded cheerful, as if nothing was wrong, and agreed to meet at a cafe near her apartment. I remember my hands shaking as I stirred my coffee. She was rambling on about floral arrangements and bridesmaids' shoes, completely oblivious to the tension in my chest. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Sarah, I interrupted, my voice low but firm. We need to talk about Tom. Her face froze mid-sentence. I explained everything, what I'd seen, how I'd felt, how uncomfortable her behavior had made me. I kept my tone as even as I could, but my voice trembled from holding it in for too long. She stared at me, expression shifting from confusion to offense. Are you serious right now? She snapped. You think I'm flirting with your boyfriend? That's insane. I didn't back down. Maybe you don't see it or maybe you do, but it needs to stop. She laughed bitterly. You're insecure. That's your problem, not mine. I blinked, stunned by how fast her mask had dropped. My little sister, who I'd defended and supported through everything, sat there across from me, unapologetic. I stood up, my heart heavy. If you can't even acknowledge what you're doing, then I don't know how we're supposed to move forward. She rolled her eyes and muttered, Whatever. It's your drama, not mine. I walked out of that cafe knowing that something inside me had cracked and that it might never be the same again. A week before the wedding, I found myself pacing in my apartment, exhausted from the sleepless nights and the emotional whiplash of the last few days. Sarah had stopped speaking to me entirely. My parents were disappointed in how I handled things. And Tom just kept insisting I was wrong. You need to let it go, he had said the night before. Sarah's not thinking about you like that. You're just stressed. Maybe I was, but my gut never felt wrong. Not this time. That afternoon, I decided to drive over to my parents' house to try and make peace. Maybe even fix what was broken before the wedding locked everything in place. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees as I pulled into their driveway. I didn't knock. I was family. I walked up the front steps, then stopped. I heard muffled voices. They weren't coming from inside the house. They were outside, in the backyard. Curious and hoping to catch my mom or dad, I stepped around the side of the house toward the garden. And that's when my world stopped. There, behind the large hydrangea bush near the shed, partly concealed but not enough, stood Sarah and Tom, locked in an embrace. Her legs were wrapped tightly around his waist. His hand was under her shirt. They were kissing deeply, feverishly, like no one else existed. But I existed. I was standing right there. The air was ripped from my lungs. My stomach flipped violently. My knees almost buckled beneath me. It felt like every part of me shattered all at once. What the hell is this? I screamed, my voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. They jumped apart instantly. Sarah's face went pale. Tom stumbled backward, reaching out as if he could somehow undo what I had just seen. It's not what it looks like? Tom started. Don't, I choked. Don't insult me. Tears blurred my vision as I stepped back, the hot flush of rage and heartbreak crashing over me like a tidal wave. You, my sister, and you, my boyfriend, how could you? Sarah's lips trembled. I'm so sorry, it wasn't supposed to happen. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Not supposed to happen, I whispered. You made it happen. Tom tried to reach for me. Please, don't touch me, I hissed, stepping further away. I gave you everything. I defended you both. And this is what I get? They stood there speechless, and for once I didn't wait for an explanation. I turned, I ran. Their voices echoed behind me, calling my name, but I didn't turn back, not once. Back in my car, hands shaking, I fumbled with my keys and finally sped off. The road blurred beneath me. My vision was fogged by tears, fury, disbelief. I couldn't even scream. I couldn't cry out loud. It was too deep, too raw. When I got home, I didn't sit down. I didn't think. I packed. A bag with just the essentials, some clothes, toiletries, my phone charger. Then I grabbed my keys again and left. I drove to a nearby city and checked into a hotel. Alone, silent, and hollow. I texted Tom just one thing. We're done. Don't contact me again. Then I turned off my phone. For the first time in years, I was unreachable, and I needed it that way. The pain was like fire in my chest. The betrayal wasn't just romantic. It was blood deep, family deep. They hadn't just broken my heart. They had burned the very foundation of trust I'd built my life on. As I lay in that unfamiliar hotel bed, the silence was loud. The ache was unbearable. But at least it was honest. At least now I knew the truth. And sometimes, truth is the most painful kind of freedom. The morning after I caught Sarah and Tom together, I woke up in the hotel room feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The ache in my chest was sharp and constant, like a bruise that ran through my entire body. I sat up slowly, staring at the muted sunlight pushing through the curtains, and wondered how everything had unraveled so fast. I still hadn't turned my phone back on. Part of me was scared of what I'd see. Missed calls, angry texts, maybe more gaslighting. But there was one person who deserved to know the truth. Mark, Sarah's fiancé. He had no idea that the woman he was about to marry had betrayed her own sister just days before their wedding. I wasn't doing this out of spite or revenge. I was doing this because he deserved better than to start his life with a lie. With trembling hands, I powered my phone back on. Dozens of messages poured in. Tom, Sarah, my mom. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and found Mark's number. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Hey," he said, his voice cautious but kind. "Is everything okay? Sarah said you've been avoiding everyone. She's really worried." I swallowed hard. "Mark, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be difficult to hear." There was a long pause. "Okay." So I told him, every single detail, from the way Sarah had been acting around Tom, to the argument we had at the cafe, to what I saw in my parents' backyard. I laid it all out, my voice cracking but steady, as if saying it aloud made it more real. Mark didn't interrupt, not once. When I finally finished, the line went quiet for what felt like forever. Then he said, "Thank you for telling me. I need some time." And then he hung up. I stared at my phone, hands shaking, heart pounding. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe he'd forgive her. Maybe they'd still get married. But at least I had done what I believed was right. That night, I stayed in, ordered takeout, watched TV with the sound off. I didn't want to feel anything. I just wanted the silence to hold me for a little while. Then, 2 days later, on the night of the wedding, I got a call from my cousin Emma. "You are not going to believe what happened," she said, practically breathless. "What?" I asked, my heart skipping. Mark walked out. "What?" Right before the vows, everyone was seated. Sarah was in her dress, the music was playing, and Mark stepped up and said he had something to say. I held my breath. He said he couldn't marry someone who betrayed her own sister. He looked straight at your parents and told them they needed to hear the truth. And then he walked out of the church. I covered my mouth, stunned. Emma kept going. Sarah broke down crying. "Your mom looked like she got hit by a truck. The guests were whispering. No one knew what to do. It was like something out of a movie." Tears stung my eyes, not out of joy or vengeance, but from the sheer weight of vindication. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. They made me feel like I was imagining it all, and now the truth had finally shattered the illusion they tried so hard to protect. Emma asked gently, "Are you okay?" I didn't know how to answer. I wasn't okay, but I wasn't falling apart either. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, heard, validated. "Thank you," I whispered, "for telling me." After the call, I sat alone in that hotel room, the city lights glowing faintly beyond the window. My world had collapsed, but maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something better, something honest, and that was a start. After Emma's phone call, I sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours. Mark had walked out. He'd told the whole church what Sarah did. It was all out in the open now. No more secrets, no more pretending. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, there was a deep, aching emptiness in my chest. Even truth, when spoken loud enough to echo through a church, doesn't erase betrayal. The next few days were a blur. I kept my phone on silent, though the messages still rolled in. Sarah sobbing into my voicemail, Mom begging me to come over so the family could talk. Tom didn't even bother trying again. I guess even he knew there was no coming back. Part of me wanted to answer, to scream, to cry, to demand answers I'd never get. But the other part, the stronger part, knew silence was the only thing that truly said, "I'm done." 3 days after the wedding that never was, I finally left the hotel. I didn't go back to my apartment right away. I booked a small cabin in the mountains, 3 hours north. I needed space. I needed to breathe without feeling like the walls were closing in. Up there, surrounded by pine trees and fresh air, I started writing again. Nothing fancy, just my thoughts. Pain, anger, heartbreak. It all poured out onto paper. I wasn't trying to make sense of it yet. I was just trying to feel it without letting it drown me. One night, wrapped in a fleece blanket with a cup of hot tea in hand, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence. "They broke me, but I get to decide how I put myself back together." That was the moment things shifted. The next morning, I went on a hike, not a long one, just a couple miles through the woods. It was quiet, peaceful. The crunch of leaves under my boots, the distant sound of birdsong, it reminded me that the world still turned, even when your personal world comes to a crashing halt. A week after the wedding, I finally responded to Emma's last text. I told her I appreciated her honesty, that I wasn't ready to face anyone yet, but I was okay. She replied immediately saying, "Take all the time you need, I've got your back." I didn't hear from Sarah again, not directly anyway, but word traveled. She moved out of our parents' house and went to stay with a friend. She didn't go back to work. From what I gathered, she wasn't handling things well. Honestly, I didn't wish her harm, but I also didn't feel responsible for her downfall. She made her choices, I made mine. A month passed before I finally returned to my apartment. The place still smelled like Tom. I opened every window, stripped the bed, tossed the coffee mugs we used to share. It was petty maybe, but it felt good. Cleansing even. That night, I sat on the floor, staring out the window, and realized something. I was alone. Truly alone. But I wasn't lonely. There's a difference. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't bending myself into a shape that fits someone else's needs. I wasn't shrinking to keep the peace. I wasn't gaslighting myself into believing I was overreacting. I was just me, hurt, healing, but whole. It had been nearly 6 weeks since the wedding fell apart, since I saw my sister with Tom, since I walked away from my entire family. And yet the silence didn't last. One morning, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in my mother's handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment before finally tearing it open. Inside was a letter, a real, handwritten letter. "We need to talk, not for Sarah's sake, not even for Tom's, but for us, for this family, please. Come to the house, Sunday, noon, we'll all be there." I let the letter fall to the floor. After everything, they wanted to talk? I spent the next 2 days going back and forth. Part of me wanted to throw the letter away. Another part, the stubborn one that still longed for closure, whispered just go. Not to fix things, not to make peace, but to say the things I hadn't said, the things they needed to hear. Sunday came, gray and cold, like the universe was mirroring my nerves. I parked 2 houses down, sat in the car for 10 minutes just breathing. When I finally walked up the familiar steps of my childhood home, it felt like approaching a battlefield. My mother opened the door. Her face looked worn, less put together than usual, her eyes tired. "You came," she whispered. I didn't smile. I just walked past her into the living room. They were all there. Sarah sitting on the couch, eyes puffy and red. My dad standing stiffly by the fireplace. Tom wasn't there, thank God, but the air was thick with tension, as if his memory still sat in the room. No one spoke at first. Then my mother cleared her throat. We just wanted to talk, to understand, to fix what we can. I let out a soft, bitter laugh. You want to fix this? Now. My father opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. Where was this energy when I was crying myself to sleep, when I was begging you to believe me, when you all made me feel insane? They didn't answer. Silence fell again, heavy and suffocating. Sarah finally spoke. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. I turned to look at her, really look at her. She looked small, broken, not the confident bride-to-be I'd seen weeks ago. I didn't plan for any of it to happen, she continued, tears slipping down her cheeks. It just did, and I hate myself for it. I crossed my arms. Do you hate yourself because it was wrong, or because you got caught? She didn't answer. That silence said everything. My mom started crying then, quietly. She reached out like she might touch my arm, but I pulled back. I needed you, I said, voice shaking now. And you made me feel like I was crazy. You defended them. You doubted me. I know, she whispered, and I'm so sorry. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was something. I stood there for a long time, unsure what to say next. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to turn back time and erase it all. Instead, I just said, I'm not here to make peace. I'm here to say this. I deserved better, and from now on, I'm done accepting less. Then I turned and walked out. No hugs, no forgiveness, just the cold air on my skin and the sound of my boots on the steps. This time, I didn't look back. After I walked out of my parents' house that cold Sunday afternoon, I didn't cry. Not right away. I just drove. No destination, no music, just the hum of the road beneath me and the sound of my own breath trying to steady itself. I ended up at a small lake about 40 minutes outside town. It was the place Dad used to take me fishing when I was little, back before everything got complicated. I sat on a bench watching the still water, and finally the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent grief slipping down my cheeks, the kind you can't hold in anymore. For a long time, I thought family meant loyalty, that blood was everything. But that day, staring at the gray sky reflected in the lake, I realized something. Family isn't who shares your DNA. Family is who stands with you when the world falls apart and doesn't expect you to clean up their mess. And my real family? That circle had just gotten a whole lot smaller. In the days that followed, I took time off work. I let myself rest. I deleted Tom's number, blocked Sarah on everything, and ignored my mom's daily texts. Each message came with a different tone, some apologetic, some guilt-tripping, some just sad, but I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be. I started going to therapy, not because I was crazy like Sarah once joked when I was younger, but because I needed someone to help me sort through the emotional wreckage. My therapist, Angela, was the first person in weeks who didn't try to tell me how I should feel. One afternoon, I told her everything about the wedding, the betrayal, the confrontation. When I finally finished, she sat with me in silence, then said softly, "You didn't just lose a relationship. You lost trust, identity, and the illusion that your family had your back. That kind of grief is real and valid." That sentence stuck with me. The illusion that your family had your back, that had always been my blind spot. I was the reliable one, the peacekeeper, the one who swallowed hurt so no one else had to deal with it. But in doing that, I'd trained them to take me for granted. Not anymore. I started reclaiming space, physically and emotionally. I repainted my apartment, got rid of everything that reminded me of Tom, even the throw blanket he bought, which I once loved, gone. I also started journaling. Not the fluffy kind with affirmations and glitter pens, just raw, unfiltered honesty. I wrote letters I'd never send, poured out the anger, the heartbreak, the resentment, and through that, I began to feel lighter. A month later, I got a letter from Mark, the man Sarah was supposed to marry. It was handwritten and folded neatly inside a plain white envelope. "Thank you," he wrote. "Thank you for telling me the truth, even when no one else believed you. I don't know where I'd be now if you hadn't. I'm sorry for what you went through. I'm sorry your family didn't protect you. I hope you know you did the right thing." I read that letter 10 times, and then I smiled. Because maybe I had lost people who never truly saw me, but I had finally started seeing myself. The letter from Mark sat on my nightstand for weeks. I didn't frame it or tuck it away in a memory box. I needed to see it every morning. Not because it made me feel vindicated, but because it reminded me that someone had seen the truth when I was drowning in doubt. That single page helped silence the little voice in my head that kept asking, was it really that bad? Did I overreact? I hadn't. The betrayal was real, and the healing would be too. One rainy Tuesday evening, I got an email from my mother. The subject line just said, "Can we talk?" I hovered my mouse over it, considering. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 2 months. Every call she tried to make, I let go to voicemail. Every message, unread. But for some reason, this one felt different. I clicked. "Sweetheart," it began, "I've been thinking about everything. I won't pretend I understand all of your choices, but I know I hurt you. We all did, and I want to make things right. Can we please sit down, just the two of us?" She signed it. "Love, Mom." I stared at the screen for a long time. She was trying, but I didn't know if I had anything left to give. After a couple of days, I agreed to meet her. A neutral location, an old diner we used to go to after doctor's appointments when I was a kid. Something about the cracked red booths and stale coffee made it feel safe. She was already there when I walked in. Hair pinned up, nervous fingers tapping the rim of her mug. When she saw me, she stood too fast, knocking her napkin to the floor. "Hi," she breathed. I just nodded and sat down. We didn't hug. For the first few minutes, we danced around the obvious, talked about the weather, how the local high school football team made playoffs. But eventually, the silence between us got too loud to ignore. "I should have believed you," she said finally, her voice small. "When you told me something was off between Tom and Sarah, I should have listened." "You made me feel crazy," I whispered. She looked away, guilt clouding her eyes. I didn't want to believe it, that my daughters could hurt each other like that I let it happen right under my nose. I wanted to scream, to say, "You didn't just let it happen, you defended her." But I didn't, because I could see in her eyes that she knew it now. And sometimes that admission carries more weight than any apology. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know I can't fix what's broken, but I don't want to lose you too." I studied her face. The woman who once bandaged my scraped knees, who made cupcakes for my third-grade bake sale. And the same woman who told me I was overreacting when I cried about betrayal that shattered my world. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice trembling. "Not yet." She nodded. "That's fair." We sat in silence. For the first time, it wasn't uncomfortable. When I left the diner, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, like the world was rinsing off its mess. That night, I stood in front of my mirror and said out loud, "You are not the problem. You never were." I didn't need their validation anymore. I wasn't their scapegoat. I was finally free. This story isn't just about betrayal, it's about awakening. It's about discovering your worth after being made to feel invisible, unheard, or too sensitive. For too long, the narrator was expected to be the peacemaker, the bigger person, the one who forgave without question. But peace at the cost of self-respect is not peace. It's self-abandonment. One of the most powerful lessons here is that your instincts matter. If something feels wrong, it probably is. So often, especially within families, we're told to let things go, to not cause drama, or to stay silent for the sake of harmony. But silence often protects the wrong people. Standing up for yourself, even when it means walking away, is one of the most courageous things you can do. Another takeaway is the importance of emotional boundaries. The people closest to you may not always treat you with kindness, and when they don't, you have every right to protect your space. Healing doesn't require a dramatic showdown. Sometimes it's found in a quiet decision. I deserve better, and I'm done explaining why. In the end, the narrator didn't need revenge. They didn't even need an apology to move forward. They chose peace, not the kind that comes from pleasing others, but the kind that comes from honoring yourself. To anyone watching who has ever been made to feel like the villain for setting boundaries, you are not selfish. You are not overreacting. You are reclaiming your power. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to bring real stories that speak to the heart. And if you've ever had to walk away to find peace, we see you and we stand with you.